This is Entertainment for Review, and today I'm going to be continuing the Friday the 13th review series with Friday the 13th Part 6, Jason Lives, which was released in 1986. I'm excited about this entry in the series, particularly because on the day this is being posted, it is in fact Friday the 13th. As you can tell by the title, Jason Lives, this movie does bring back Jason Voorhees to the franchise. The fact that he was absent from the last movie, Part 5, A New Beginning, I feel like made that movie suffer a little bit. Sure, he was in dreams and hallucinations, but Jason himself was not truly in it. I think they made the right choice bringing him back here, and it pays off in dividends in this movie. And we do still get to continue Tommy Jarvis's story as well. So as always, please be aware that this review will be containing spoilers. And with that, let's start taking a look at Friday the 13th, Part 6, Jason Lives. Now, this movie starts off on a dark and stormy night, and it does start off immediately with Tommy Jarvis. He and his friend Alan have escaped from their mental health facility and are on a mission. Mainly Tommy's mission, with Alan just along for the ride. Tommy wants to go and verify that Jason's body is really dead and destroy it. He's planning to burn it. He says he's hoping that this will make the hallucination stop. And that's really the only reference to anything from the last movie. In the last movie, we saw him seeing visions of Jason. But we have no reference to the end of the last movie where Tommy himself donned the hockey mask and seemed like he was about to do some ill will of his own. Tommy has with him Jason's hockey mask, the same one he was wearing in the last couple of movies, as you can still see the damage inflicted at the end of Part 3. They arrive at the Eternal Rest Cemetery, and they do find Jason's grave. It actually seems kind of odd that Jason would even have a marked grave. They dig him up, and Tommy opens the coffin to reveal what's inside is just a rotting corpse. And if Tommy could have left the past and let enough be enough, it probably would have stayed that way. However, his thirst for closure and vengeance end up costing him. Tommy goes over and grabs a metal bar that was a section of the fence and stabs Jason with it multiple times and then leaves it impaled in his body. He's going to get the gas can when lightning strikes the metal rod once and then twice, and then we see Jason's eyes open as he's revived. So in Tommy's attempts to finally destroy Jason, he's actually the one that brought him back. Tommy goes over and pulls the rod out, and when he's getting out of the coffin, Jason leaps up and tries to grab him. He then follows him up onto the higher ground. We don't know if that's what he's been in the past, but in this case, Jason really does look like a walking corpse, and there are maggots falling off of him. He looks very dead and decayed. Don't let that fool you, because he has apparently also been supercharged by this lightning strike and is more powerful than ever before. As when Alan tries to sneak up behind him and hit him with a shovel, Jason turns and punches him straight through the chest, knocking his heart out. He then falls into Jason's grave and the coffin closes on him. Tommy then makes a hasty retreat and gets to his truck and drives away. Meanwhile, Jason dons his returned hockey mask. Tommy makes a retreat to the police station where he attempts to warn the sheriff about what's going on. The sheriff just in general doesn't believe him and is actually getting kind of annoyed and just thinks he's crazy. Tommy pushes his luck a little bit, the sheriff locks him in a jail cell. It's also worth noting that this is the town of Crystal Lake, but it was renamed Forest Green in an attempt to forget the tragedies that have occurred there. Next, we see two people driving down a dark wooded road. They reveal that they are two camp counselors, in fact head counselors, heading to Camp Forest Green, which is a reopening of Camp Crystal Lake, only with a new name. So this movie is the first one since the first movie with a return to the actual camp. These counselors are Darren and Elizabeth, and they run smack dab into Jason standing in the middle of the road, still holding the metal rod that was a piece of the fence that resurrected him. Elizabeth has the right idea and she wants to just back up and leave, but Darren decides to try to play chicken with Jason and tells her to drive forward and try to scare him out of the road. This fails to work, and he just stabs his pole through the fender and pops their tire. Darren pulls a gun from the glove compartment and tries to get out and scare Jason. This doesn't work. He impales him through the chest and flings him over his head. He intends to hit Elizabeth through the windshield. She manages to get out of the car, but gets stuck in a ditch filled with water, and Jason ends up impaling her through the head, driving her head underwater. The next morning, the sheriff is visited by four counselors from Camp Forest Green, one of them being his daughter Megan, the others being Sissy, Paula, and Court. They're asking for help looking for the head counselors, Darren and Elizabeth, saying they never showed up and they don't know what to do to get the camp set up, and that the campers are going to be arriving soon. Tommy tries to warn these kids about Jason and says that he'll probably be heading to the camp because that's where he's most familiar with. The sheriff sends the kids away and tells Tommy that he's going to drive him to the city limits and send him on his way and never wants to see him again. We then see that Martin the groundskeeper has discovered Jason's dug up grave and decides to fill it in. He notices a foot sticking out of the coffin and just thinks that they didn't put the body back properly. He decides just to fill in the grave so that he doesn't get blamed for this, and he delivers one heck of a line, almost breaking the fourth wall, staring into the camera.
Why'd they have to go and dig up Jason? Some folks have a strange idea of entertainment.
We then see Jason making a brisk pace through the woods. We catch up with the 4 counselors at the camp, getting some things ready and discussing the possibility of Jason being real, when a busload of campers arrives. So this marks another first for the series. This is the first time that we see this actually as a functional camp with campers in attendance. We then cut to a group of people who are having a paintball game in the woods. Through their conversation, we learn that they're a group of business executives. One of them is very angry about being eliminated by a woman, and he's hacking with a machete through some brush when Jason grabs his hand and flings him into a tree, ripping his arm off, and leaving a bloody smiley face on the tree. Jason is definitely the most souped up he's ever been, and he stole the man's machete in this scene, providing him with his signature weapon. Jason then gets his first triple kill in the series history when he dives out of a tree in front of 3 of the executives and decapitates them with one swing of his machete. One of the others, who seems to be a bit of a klutz, shoots Jason with a paintball gun, but then runs away with Jason in quick pursuit. Meanwhile, Tommy is being escorted out of town by the sheriff and the deputy. He's driving his truck with the sheriff and deputy and their cruiser behind him when he sees an opportunity and sees the sign for the Eternal Rest Cemetery. He darts that way and jumps out of the truck and runs through the cemetery, chased by the sheriff and deputy. They do eventually catch and restrain him, and he tries to get them to look at the grave, and they do, but they see that it's been filled in. And then the groundskeeper, Martin, comes up, and he asks him if he filled it in, and tells him he needs to dig it up to see that it's not Jason. He scoffs at this suggestion. We then do see the counselors getting started with some activities with the campers, and we see Tommy led to the edge of town, and the sheriff tells him to leave and not come back. Later that night, we see Martin stumbling through the woods drinking. He goes to throw his empty bottle over his head, but it's caught by Jason, who breaks it and stabs him through the neck with it, and seems to hack him a few times with a machete for good measure. There were also a pair of lovebirds in the woods, Stephen and Annette, and they hear Martin scream. Stephen goes to take a look, and Jason spots him and begins to pursue him. They get to the motorcycle, but Jason gets another multi-kill, a double kill this time, stabbing them both through with the machete. At the camp, we see all the campers sleeping in their bunks, and 2 of the counselors, Sissy and Paula, are playing cards in the staff cabin. This camp does seem a bit understaffed, although as we already know, the 2 head counselors will never be arriving. They hear a scream from one of the cabins and go to check. One of the girls said she saw a monster and thought it was real. They tell her it was just a bad dream, although it could have been Jason. They then note that Court has left the camp after receiving a phone call. And where has he gone? To meet up with a girl in her RV, where they are sleeping together, which is a very dangerous activity for teens in these movies. Jason does see that RV rocking and goes to investigate. Stares at it for a moment with a Michael Myers-like head tilt. Sorry, Jason, but Michael was first and you're stealing his gimmick. Jason pulls the power cord to the RV, causing it to go dark. Court and Nikki go out to investigate and decide to leave. Unbeknownst to them, Jason has gained access to the RV while they were outside and is hiding in the bathroom. While Court begins driving away, he pulls Nikki into the bathroom and he kills her by banging her head into the wall, bending out the outside of the RV. He then sneaks up behind Court and stabs him through the head with a hunting knife. The RV then crashes and tilts over on its side. We then do get an awesome shot of Jason bursting out of the RV and standing on top of it, walking away unscathed. Megan is at the sheriff's department talking to her father when he gets a call from his deputy telling him he found some bodies. These are the bodies of the 2 head counselors Jason had killed earlier. While Megan is waiting at the station, Tommy Jarvis calls. He says he wants to talk to the sheriff and has a plan. Megan says she knows where he is and's gonna come meet him. We see the sheriff and other officers at the crime scene. He believes that Tommy Jarvis is the one behind these killings, trying to make his point true. The deputy calls him over and reveals that he found another body, a dismembered body. This was Roy, the other executive that Jason had chased off earlier in the movie. It appears that he did indeed catch him. We see Jason arrive at the camp, and who knows if he can read or not, but he does seem a little confused by the new name of the camp hanging from the sign. Sissy and Paula are in their room, and Sissy thinks she hears Court outside the window playing a prank, so she tries to prank him back by dumping some soda out the window, trying to land it on his head. When she gets close to the window again, it's not Court outside, but Jason. He grabs her, pulling her through the window and out of her slippers. Jason then kills her outside by twisting her head around. Paula had overheard this, but thinks it's just Sissy and Court having fun. Jason carries Sissy's body past one of the campers' cabins, and the girl who had had a nightmare earlier sees this and gets scared again. He wanders up to Paula's cabin, carrying a bloody machete that she found outside. Paula again says it's just Sissy and Court playing pranks, and she takes the girl back to her cabin. Megan had met up with Tommy and picked him up in her car. She doesn't seem to be taking this seriously. He doesn't want her to come with him, but he does agree reluctantly, because it wouldn't be safe for him to continue driving his same truck around. He gets some supplies, but when they're on their way, they run into a police barricade. Megan tries to make an escape, but runs into a second police barricade, this one containing her father. They take Tommy and her back to the sheriff's station, and the sheriff is convinced that Tommy is the one doing the killings. They then get a call about the RV crash and the bodies of Court and Nikki. The sheriff tells the deputy to keep his daughter there, lock up Tommy, and wait for him to call back. After Paula gets the camper back into her bunk, she's slowly leaving the cabin, being watched from Jason outside the window. She manages to get back to her cabin outside before Jason comes in and kills her, slashing her with a machete and throwing her body through a window. Megan then comes up with a plan to get Tommy out of the jail cell. He makes it seem like he stole her sketch pad after she threw it at him, and then when she gets too close, he grabs her and forces her to kiss him. The deputy comes over to break them apart. She backs up and grabs his pistol, holding him at gunpoint, forcing him to let Tommy out of the cell, and they put the deputy in and lock him in. This is probably the safest place for him anyway. They then leave in Megan's car. Tommy reveals what his plan is, and that's that he believes the only way to stop Jason is to return him to his original resting place in Crystal Lake, where he drowned in 1957. Jason enters one of the campers' cabins cabins and walks through. He doesn't harm any of the children, but when he notices the girl that Paula had put back to bed is awake, he gets very close to her, but doesn't harm her. The sheriff and 2 deputies then arrive at the camp. When Jason hears this, he leaves the cabin. The 3 officers split up. The sheriff goes to the staff cabin, where he finds the mess of Paula's murder. One of the deputies goes down to the dock, and he's walking. He spots Jason, but Jason throws a knife, hitting him in the head, killing him, and his body lands in one of the canoes. The sheriff begins running from cabin to cabin, checking that the children are okay, when he spots that one of the bunks is empty. This bunk belongs to Nancy. It's the little girl who kept getting out of bed scared. The other deputy hears something by the wood pile and goes to check it out. Nancy runs up to him and says that there was a scary man in her cabin. While he's trying to calm her down, Jason pops out of the bushes behind him. Nancy runs away. The deputy shoots Jason several times with no effect. Jason grabs the deputy by the head and crushes his head with his bare hands. Nancy makes it to the sheriff, who takes her and then the boys coming out of their cabin all to the girls' cabin and tells them all to hide under the bed and wait for him to come back. He then goes outside looking around and finds the body of the deputy and then has a standoff with Jason. Jason goes to raise his machete. The sheriff shoots him with a shotgun. Now, this does carry enough force to at least knock Jason down. But he does pop back up again moments later, and the sheriff shoots him again and again, but each time he pops back up. The sheriff switches to his pistol, but this again has no effect on Jason. Eventually makes a retreat with Jason in pursuit. Tommy and Megan arrive at the camp. Megan goes up and sees the bloody mess in her former cabin, and goes and finds the campers all in the girls' cabin. Tommy starts putting his plan into place. He goes down to the dock and finds the dead sheriff in one of the boats and goes to the other. He has a bag with a large, thick chain, and he begins rolling a rock towards the dock. Megan tries to go to her father's car to call for help on the radio, but she finds Paula's head in the driver's seat. She starts yelling for help from her father, and this is overheard by Jason, who starts making his way there. The sheriff decides to intervene and attacks Jason. He's doing well for a moment and seems to be making some headway, but then Jason grabs him and folds his body backwards, snapping his spine, killing him. Jason then makes his way back to the camp and bursts into the camper's cabin, terrifying them, but again, he doesn't harm any of the children. Megan runs to their cabin and Jason comes bursting out through the side of it, grabs Megan. He's about to kill her, but then Tommy grabs his attention, saying that it's me that you want. I always think that Tommy overvalues his position here. Jason wants to kill anybody who's at this camp, though he probably isn't happy that Tommy got away at the graveyard. I always wonder if he thinks that Jason remembers him from when he was a kid, and I doubt that's true. Either way, his taunts do work, and Jason begins to stalk down towards the lake and marches right into the water, heading towards Tommy. Megan momentarily distracts him again, and he seems like he's going to turn around, but then Tommy regains his attention. And he keeps walking until he is fully submerged. I don't think Tommy planned for this, because he's not sure where Jason's going to come up, so he starts pouring gasoline on the water and sets it on fire, surrounding the boat. Jason does leap up out of the water, and him and Tommy have a struggle. Tommy is unable to get the chain around Jason's neck, and eventually it manages to force him off. Jason catches on fire from the gasoline, and then leaps back up onto Tommy. This time, Tommy is able to get the chain around his neck, and Jason finally leaps up onto the boat, breaking it in half. This sends the rock down into the water, dragging Jason with it, and Jason dragging Tommy. At the bottom of the lake, we see the old Camp Crystal Lake sign with the word blood spray painted on it. Jason and Tommy struggle below the water, but Jason is able to hold Tommy down until he loses consciousness. He then lets his body go and it floats to the surface. Megan sees this and runs down and swims out and tries to rescue Tommy, though the water's not deep enough for Jason to be out of reach, and he reaches up and grabs her leg and tries to pull her down. She manages to get to the back half of the boat that is still floating and starts up the propeller and manages to swing it into Jason. It hits his neck, and this does enough damage to seemingly slow him down and cause him to eventually sit motionless beneath the water. Megan manages to get Tommy back to the shore and revives him with all the campers standing around. Tommy comes to, he says it's over, and Jason's home. We then do end the movie with a shot of the lake and Jason still chained underneath of it. Now, he is still moving and his eye moves, and we know he's still alive, but he does seem semi-subdued and at rest for the moment beneath the lake. Jason Lives, to me, is a Friday the 13th movie that's just done right. I think this is an excellent installment in the franchise. The most important thing is that it brings the true Jason back, and he is just a beast in your face this entire movie. In this movie, there's no lurking around or hiding, nothing to make you wonder if it is Jason. It's just Jason, and he's right there, and he's coming right at you to kill you. Other strategies worked in the other movie, but we've seen it before. We know Jason's the killer, and that's all we need to see, is him out there doing what he does. They establish that it is Jason definitely back this time from the very beginning. When he comes out of his grave, it's clear that his wounds in the final chapter did kill him, and he was dead, and probably would have stayed that way if not for Tommy Jarvis's interference. But I do like when they bring him back here with a lightning strike, he is embraced as a full-on juggernaut at this point. He is much more stronger and powerful than ever before, and he is basically immune to most physical damage. We saw that regular guns had no effect on him. A shotgun had enough force to knock him down, but could only keep him down for a few seconds. They finally embraced the supernatural side of Jason in this movie, and I think that was a great way to go forward. Some of the earlier movies almost seem to normalize Jason and make you wonder if he is a supernatural being, because he was much more susceptible to damage. And in each movie, he seemed to get a little bit stronger as things moved along. But this is Jason at his finest, just a total killing machine. I do like that this movie finally got back to the original camp. For the first time, we got to see it actually have campers, although their summer was abruptly cut short. It is surprising that they would try to open a camp here again. I guess after years of no Jason, they all grow confident once again. And former tragedies or no, don't want to waste that valuable real estate on a lakeside. I do like that we get a second chance at continuing Tommy Jarvis's story, pretty much erase the mistakes that were done in part 5. This is the final appearance in the series for Tommy Jarvis, and that's probably because he feels like his work here is done and maybe finally moves on from the Crystal Lake area. It was clear that Tommy embraced the supernatural side of Jason in this movie, as we saw him reading an occult book to try to figure out a solution to stop him. It worked for now, but as we all know, it is not over. As is always the case, Jason's appearance went through some changes in this movie. He was wearing clothes that looked the same, or at least very similar to the ones he died in part 4. The mask, although is not exactly the same as the original mask, does look very good and very close to the original mask, and they try to take care to make you think it is by including the damage he received to it in part 3 with an axe to the head. As for Jason's physical features in this movie, he's just a rotting corpse in this movie, basically. Former deformities aren't as well featured because they've probably rotted away, and he's basically just a walking superpowered corpse. Another difference is Jason does choose to wear gloves throughout this movie. Jason racks up an impressive 18 kills in this movie, and they are all his kills, starting with Tommy's friend Alan in the graveyard. He then moves on to Darren and Elizabeth, then gets Bert, followed by Stan, Katie, and Larry in one swoop. He then gets the graveyard groundskeeper Martin, followed by Stephen and Annette. Next he gets both Nikki and Court. They discover the body of Roy, who is killed off screen, and then finally at the camp, Jason gets Sissy, Paula, the 2 deputies, and Sheriff Garris. We are left with no illusion that Jason is still alive at the end of this movie. He definitely is. Critically, this was the most successful movie since the original. On Rotten Tomatoes, it gets a 50% score from the critics and a 53% score from audiences. And over on IMDb, the audience score is 6 out of 10. I personally think all of these are way too low. I think this is a high point in the series. And after the bit of a disappointment from part 5, I think this delivers strong. My score for this movie is a 8 out of 10. Please let me know your thoughts on Friday the 13th Part 6, Jason Lives, in the comment section below. Please be sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel, and keep an eye out for my next video coming soon, which will be Friday the 13th Part 7, The New Blood. Happy Friday the 13th, everyone.